I can't really agree with that one. That writing was not good. I've only read the opening pages of the book. Actually, only page 1. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Theo. Thank you for hanging out. I thought it would be interesting to look at some 1-star reviews of some books that I've read over the last year or two that I've really enjoyed. There are going to be people out there that didn't enjoy them. So I thought it'd be really funny to look at their reviews, their negative reviews, and see if there's any, justification. See if I can find any common ground, maybe some criticisms that I can agree with, or if they're just completely full of crap. So just a caveat before we get into this, I'm looking at reviews that again are negative 1-star reviews. I've taken some reviews that are, shorter. And if I have screenshotted a portion of a longer review, I've made sure to not just cut out a negative section of an overall positive review. I've wanted to make sure to cut out a portion of the review that's reflective of the tone and opinion of the whole review. I'm not going to include names, obviously, and there's nothing crazy or mean or whatever, but they're just 1-star reviews for books that I really enjoyed, and I thought it'd be fun to share them with you and see what they say. Without further ado, the first one I was going to choose was a book that I really enjoyed by Stephen King, and this one is 11/22/63. This one says, if you remember the nightmare crispness of Stephen King's early short stories, terrifying images that 30 years later are indelibly imprinted on my mind, or the sheer heart-pounding terror of some of the earlier novels, I remember needing to put the Dead Zone in a separate room because I couldn't sleep near it. This book will be like running into the cutest guy from high school and discovering he's a 300-pound middle-aged slob. Yeah, okay. So I don't really know what this one means. Apparently, this person didn't like it. I think what they're trying to say is this book was not what they were expecting. And I think this is probably something that a lot of people run into with Stephen King. A lot of people think Stephen King writes horror, and he does. He writes a lot of thrillers and mystery books and suspenseful books. But, he also writes books that are longer and sweeter and, more buildup and a slice of life, coming of age type of story. And so this one was really a slice of life in the 50s and 60s. There wasn't really a horror element in this. And I feel like, this person says, terrifying images, indelibly imprinted on my mind, heart-pounding terror, couldn't sleep near it. They reference a book called Dead Zone. This is not that type of book. So I think this person went into this Stephen King book hoping for a horror book, and that's not what this one is. So I really like this book, but I was warned and prepped for what this book was about and the pacing and the type of story it is and when it takes place. I can see that if you're not prepared for that, it can be a little bit jarring and maybe not what the average Stephen King reader would grab. Well, I shouldn't say that. The average person that thinks they like Stephen King or thinks they want to try a Stephen King book, this one might not be the one for them. Another one for 11/22/63. I love Stephen King. I've read almost everything he's written with only a few exceptions. I wish I had let 11/22/63 be another exception. If I knew what I know now before I started reading, I would never have picked it up. It's not like I wasn't skeptical. Books on time traveling don't entice me much. Then why did you pick this up? However, Stephen King is a wonderful writer, so I figured he could work his magic also on this. He did not. Blah, 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 something teaches, meets a woman, falls in love, and things get and if I've blurred anything out, it's spoilery. So that's probably why. Meets a woman, falls in love, and things get predictably convoluted. Jake traces Lee Oswald. The last 2 sentences sum up 400 to 500 interminable pages. I have no idea why the book had to be so long. Nothing in the storyline seems to have required it. Don't get me wrong, I read plenty of fat books. If the story keeps its pace, the more of it, the better. There are books where I, on the last of 1,000+ pages, am fervently wishing, oh, please let it not end. That seems like a dream after having read this. There is no pace in 11/22/63, no tension, nothing to keep you reading, yet I kept reading. Come on, it's the King we're talking about here. Yawn, nope, no improvement. I can sum this up in 3 words if you haven't read it yet. Do not bother. Wow, and this was tagged in, I guess, worst books of all time or something. I think that's what it is at the bottom, if you can see that. Very interesting. So this is another one where I think this person fell into the trap of pacing long story. If you want something quick and snappy and jaw-droppingly, suspenseful and thrilling and, horror, but like that's not what this book is. This is a chill book with a romance in it. Yes, time travel, but I thought it was done very well. It's a portal fantasy. And I don't know. I don't agree. I think that there was a lot of buildup and suspense. Yes, we break away into a subplot where the main character kind of lives his own life and has his other worries to I guess worry about. But yeah, that's not the main part of the book. And I thought the main plot of the book, when you're in it, which you're in it for most of it, it was suspenseful enough for me. I thought it was pretty interesting and the plot kept going and I was very curious as to what was going to happen. Even when I thought I was able to sort of like skip ahead or maybe I anticipated what was going to happen, I was still, the tension was built enough for me. So I can't really agree with that one. The next one is short and sweet and it just says, would have been a good short story. A lot of people complaining about the length of this one. I don't think that this would have been a good short story. And the reason why is because a lot of what makes this book beautiful is the time you spend in the atmosphere and the world that is the 50s and 60s and adapting to that. And, the main character finds kind of his own life and his own story within the story. So yeah, would it have been a good short story? I mean, maybe like it could have been twisted that way, but it would have been much more focused on the main plot and the time travel and without giving anything away, would have been focused on that one aspect. And I think that what made the book so special would have been left out. So no, I don't really think this would have made a good short story. Another one, let's see. I have a disclaimer. I've never liked anything I've read by Stephen King. This book was no different. For how long this book was extremely light on story, it was not light on story. I'm not even going to keep reading on this one. This one's crap. If you don't like Stephen King, don't pick up his books. All right, from now on, I'm going to start all these reviews with this little snapshot that shows the average rating and what percentage gave this book a 1 star. So as you can see, for 11/22/63, almost 500,000, ratings, 485,000, 43,000 reviews. But again, 485,000 star ratings. Of that, 1% was 1 star. So take these with a grain of salt. It's an excellent book. If you haven't read it, go read it. If you like Stephen King, you're missing out if you haven't read it. And all these people, objectively, it seems, are wrong. So there we go. The next book is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. You'll see here 1% 1-star reviews, average 4.37 with 801,000 ratings. That's almost 1 million ratings, star ratings, 86,000 reviews. Of those, more than half were 5 stars and only 1% was 1 star. So what do these people have to say? What are y'all talking about? Absolutely not. No. Ove is an asshole, a fully realized, blatant, and aggressive dickbag. He is homophobic, transphobic, fatphobic, and xenophobic. And yeah, you can say it's because he's ignorant and doesn't actually care that those people are different than him. Okay, then why is he constantly pointing out their differences? Neighbor's overweight, according to Ove, blah, blah, blah. I'll skip through this review. I know people like Ove exist. I live in the South. I can't spit without hitting one of them, but I don't like seeing them put on a pedestal. Blah, 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 blah. This is a Scrooge situation. Okay, here we have a little bit of merit. Here I can see what they're talking about. Ove is one of these characters. This person is not entirely wrong, but I feel like they're missing the point. So the point of this story is the fact that yes, these people exist. Ove does display a lot of these characteristics, but in the course of the story, the development and the journey that this person goes through for other reasons other than what's happening around him, his own personal struggle and his own personal life and what happens to him. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, starts to make him rethink how he's living and what his priorities are and what's important in the world. I feel like this review was from someone who on the surface, like maybe just didn't quite get the point. If you can't quite get past Ove as a character, then yes, I think you're going to have a lot of problems with the story as a whole. And yeah, it is kind of a Scrooge situation. Grumpy old, kind of racist, kind of just, he's not a racist. He's not a homophobic. He's not he's an everything phobic. He doesn't like people. He doesn't like change in routine. He doesn't like people that conflict or challenge him and his life and his routines. He just doesn't like other people. He's lived a long life and he's near the end of it. And he's like, you know what? I don't want to deal with all this shit anymore. So he's an everything phobic. So this person's not wrong. I just think we're focusing on the wrong part of the story. And I can understand someone not liking Ove and that tainting their enjoyment of the whole story. So I can't really fault this person. I get it. Do I agree? No. Do I understand? Yes. Okay, I'm going to skip to the last one for Ove because the one that I just opened was actually kind of spoilery. So I'm trying to keep this a little bit less spoilery. Let's go to this one. This one says, in the spirit of full disclosure, I have only read the opening pages of the book. Actually, only page 1. That said, let me explain why I only gave it 1 star and quit reading. Okay, you know what? Here's the thing. I'm going to quit reading your review because I think that's bullshit. You can't read page 1 of a book and then give the book a 1-star rating. That's not fair. I don't think that's cool. And like, just to throw shade on something that you think you're not going to like, no. I DNF'd that review and I'm not sorry about it. The next book is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is one of my favorite kind of, what are they called? Cyberpunk thrillers, not cyberpunk. What the hell is it called? I can't remember what it's called. It's like a sci-fi thriller genre. And this guy writes really cool stuff. And he actually writes regular thrillers too. They're not all sci-fi, but the most recent ones are. So this is one of his more famous books, the one that kind of put him on the map. This one has 4.12 star rating, 362,000 ratings, 43,000 reviews, almost 40% 5 stars. Again, 1% 1-star reviews. Take this with a grain of salt. The majority really liked this book. So Dark Matter, first review. Let's do this. If you picked this up because the science fiction aspect of the premise interests you, don't bother. If you're even halfway decent at solving mysteries, don't bother. If you're a feminist, don't bother. I've never read anything so male-centric, so predictable, and without even a lick of science, considering its science fiction premise. It's only getting 1 star because I do believe this writer has a good way with words when he bothers writing full paragraphs. We'll get to that. Rather than easy to skim one-liners. I shouldn't have been surprised, maybe, considering the blurbing authors are all big commercial thriller mystery writers who I don't much like reading. So potentially a little bit of my fault, but seriously disappointing, even more so when you consider that his word-by-word writing is good. Word-by-word writing is good. That writing was not good. But his overall treatment of character, plot, etc. is just so poor. Okay, the character development in this book, it's all right. You do follow this one person. It's more of a macro story. You're following this one person and his life, his story, his family, and what he's going through. So I get that. The fact that it doesn't have a lick of science, I disagree with that. You're right. He doesn't go into the science as much as a scientist would probably want to make this feel realistic. He gives you just enough to make it plausible and say, wow, like that could actually, I can see this is an idea book. Okay. What if this happened? How would that affect you? What would you do? That's really the purpose. The science is not the purpose of this book. He does write short, fragment sort of sentences, very, very quick ones. And again, a lot of them are fragments. If you take the sentence by itself, it's not a real sentence, but it's very quick. It's very snappy. He's gotten better at that. His older books, I found that to be a little bit more frustrating because like it doesn't flow as well. He still uses the same tactic now, but it works a lot better. So I can't fault you for that. It's a writing style. It's not really his prose. It's his writing, like actual style of writing in terms of the sentence structure. It's his writing structure. And if you don't like that, then I can see the whole book being kind of annoying. If you're a feminist, I don't know if this book is male centric. It happens to follow a male protagonist. Like if that makes it misogynistic or anti-female or whatever, then I don't know what to tell you, but it is male centric because the male is the protagonist. You are following this person. I didn't really get that from that. But again, if there's something I missed, I apologize. I'd be happy to discuss that further, but I don't really get what you're talking about. All right. Another 1-star review for Dark Matter. Thanking God that's over. Okay, that's fair. You didn't like it. You're happy it's done. No problem. On to the next one. DNF at 37% because the writing is really bugging me. I understand. Here are some 3 examples that I hope aren't spoilery. He forces me through an opening in the brick. I mentioned in a discussion thread that I was torn between picturing a 6x4 brick and picturing Paul McCartney in Help. I'd be afraid to see what all you'd be willing to do. What all has a different meaning from what all in my book. What? Okay, I may be interpreting this sentence different from what the author meant. Sure, that's a weird sentence, and I don't remember that. Black hair with bangs, just skirting, striking eyes. Talk about make you stumble over skirting, striking. Yes, that is a little bit of a whatever. Some people can consider that a little bit of an alliteration, skirting, striking, whatever. Some people might think that that flows. Other people might think that that's a little bit too whatever. I don't really care. Like, every now and then you can pick out a sentence or a few words that you may have spoken or written differently. That doesn't mean that the book is terrible or it's a bad book. But overall, I just didn't like the writing. There was a lot of action and suspense, but without the connective tissue that makes it a story. It was a surface story that lacked depth for me, and the characters were flat. The characters were okay. I think for the type of story it was trying to tell, it was doing just fine. But I can understand that criticism. I didn't like it. It was driving me crazy, and I kept thinking about all of the tempting books that are waiting for me. Better things to do and all. Apologies to friends who enjoyed this. First of all, no apologies needed. We don't always have to agree. Although it wasn't directed at me because we're not friends, but I understand what you're saying. And also the DNF thing, you know what? I have to commend this person for DNFing it, because if you know that you're not liking it, if it's driving you crazy, if all you can think about are all the other books that you'd rather be reading than sitting through this one, just DNF it. So I commend this person. A+ for DNFing something that isn't working for you. I think that's it for Dark Matter. Let's go ahead to the next one. The next one is one by a favorite fantasy author of mine. This one is John Gwynn, and this book is Malice, the first book in the Faithful of the Fallen quartet. This one got 4.15 on Goodreads, 26,000 ratings, 3,000 reviews. 1% thought this was a 1-star, 41% thought this was a 5-star, and the rest are scattered in between. Again, the majority of people thought this was a pretty good book. And I will be the first to say that Malice is not without its flaws, especially as a debut book from this author, John Gwynn. And also, the first book of a series, you can really tell that he improves as an author as he continues. So I wouldn't judge the author or the series based on Malice, but I really liked it. And for a lot of people, it worked, and it just propels you into the rest of the series. So let's look at some 1-star reviews for Malice. DNF at 190 pages. Not for me. Okay, cool. Maybe it gets better later on, but at 190 pages, I felt like reading an encyclopedia of most overused fantasy tropes. The weirdly dualist religious setup didn't help either. Reading this book evoked in me premonition of a horrible reading slump. I'm pretty sure that had I continued, I'd have a grandfather of all slumps on my hands. Thankfully, Bradbury's short stories came to my rescue. It wasn't awful, just uninteresting, plotting, very clunky. Flanagan's Ranger Apprentice series seems like a clear inspiration. I haven't read that, don't know, and it's better than Malice in terms of character development and writing. I might give this a second chance at some point, but not soon. Okay, you DNF'd at 190 pages and you would give this a second chance. I don't think you should. I think it's okay to DNF stuff once in a while. This one, it seems like you were just kind of bored. It seems like it had a lot of tropes that you don't really enjoy usually, and that is okay. You're right. The setup of the story, the premise, the overall plot is not going to work for everyone. And I would disagree with the characters. I've heard that criticism of Malice, that the characters feel flat. It's hard for me to look back based on just reading Malice, because I've read the whole thing. And so some of those characters felt I was so invested and I was so emotionally kind of attached to some of them, and I enjoyed and really despised some of them in all the right ways. So for me, it's really difficult to just take Malice on its own and say the characters in Malice weren't great or weren't developed as much, because it takes time to develop a character. It's not a standalone, it's a series. So I don't know. This one's a little bit difficult. I can see that. Kudos again for DNFing it, but I don't know. I don't agree. I liked Malice and I like Faithful and the Fallen. So what do you know? All right, another one. What can I say other than I hated it? Men doing men things. Some women propping the men up in the background. The only woman with power is a bitch. Maybe in Malice, yeah. All the characters were lifeless. The dialogue was horrendous. The religious symbolism hit your face all the time, making C.S. Lewis seem subtle. I should have DNF'd, but no, I stuck around because so many people love it and kept thinking, surely this will improve. It did not. Okay, this one seems like someone just didn't really like it. And, in terms of the woman thing, there are a lot of really good female characters throughout the series. Again, I don't know if I would judge all of that by Malice alone. But yeah, if you don't like the religious stuff, I wouldn't reach so far as to consider it in-your-face symbolism. I think this is just a guy writing a fantasy story with some inspiration. And yes, there's some thematic elements, but this isn't like a C.S. Lewis book. I really don't believe that or agree with that. But there is a little bit of prophecy. Some of the tropes are really turned on their head in this series. That's why I like it a lot. there's good versus evil, there is angels, demons, blah, blah, blah. But again, it's not all what you expect it to be. So I don't know. I can understand where this review is coming from. Again, I am of the opinion that this is a much better book than this review entails or conveys. So I would disagree, obviously. The next one is another DNF. Holy crap. DNF at page 66. I wanted to like this, but just so green. First draft, chock full of grammar and editing errors. Okay. Pause here. I will say again that Malice is not without its flaws. There are some not even grammatical things. I didn't notice a whole lot of grammatical structural problems, but I did notice a couple typos. There was one instance where one character's name was referenced and it was the fully wrong character. But if you're smart enough as a reader, you just, you pass by that. It's not without its flaws. It has its things. Very weak characterization, sadly juvenile writing with beginner mistakes. I don't think so. I actually quite liked his writing for a fantasy book. I thought it suited it quite well. The battle sequences were amazing. I thought the dialogue was just fine. Again, the characterization takes time over books. You can't just judge it on one book. I would say the writing is not juvenile. I will say that in certain parts, you can tell it's a debut, but it's not like an unimpressive debut. If your friend handed you this book and was like, bro, like I just wrote this fantasy book, like, can you like check it out and like see what you think? I think you'd be like, wow, damn dude, like this is a pretty good book. The nice thing is, and what you like to see with authors is that John Gwynn actually improves book over book over book. And we have evidence of that in the rest of the series and his other books as well. So if you like the story and the characters and like the overall vibe, aesthetic, battles, all this kind of stuff that you get out of this book, if you like that stuff enough, trust me, the writing gets better. It's fine. Okay, mistakes, blah, blah, blah. I blame this on being an early manuscript. Fine, whatever, let's skip. By page 66, I expect to have an idea of what you want to achieve with your story and have been fed a hook to make me keep reading. Here, I kind of disagree with this. I agree that by page 66 or 100 or what, it depends on how big a fantasy book is. If it's a 1,000-page book, you might want to give it a couple chapters. But I do agree that by a certain point, especially page 60, 100, 150, you really do want some sort of hook to keep reading. But I don't believe that you should have the full, complete story, plot, motivations of all these. I don't think that is necessary, and it definitely doesn't happen all the time. So there needs to be a hook, which I think we got in Malice. Malice gives you kind of a fun, normal fantasy trope to hook into. And you get a prophecy from like page 1, I think, if I can remember. So there was enough for me to keep going. A lot of these different factions and different groups. There was enough action, enough politicking and build up and stuff in the first quarter of the book to really make me content. So I don't really know if I agree. I don't know. To each their own, I guess. But yeah, I had enough to keep going, but I don't think you need to have the full what are we wanting to do and what are these characters trying to achieve that early in the book. I don't think that that's necessary. Every chapter reads like a short story, a short day-to-day scene, of a different character, none of them very interesting or connected. Well, they're not connected yet. They all become connected, trust me, and I love it. And if you're not interested in a certain character, I get it. Even in Game of Thrones, there are going to be character point of views that you just don't like as much as some of the other ones. And that's completely fine. What I do like about John Gwynn's writing, and it's alluded to here, is the chapters are short. Each one is a short little, you bounce around point of views, POVs, P's of V's, whatever. You bounce around the POVs quite a lot. And I think it's done really, really well. And the pacing is kept up because of that. So I actually like that. It's not for everybody. I like the short chapters. I like the bouncing between POVs and characters. And I like kind of the day-to-day stuff as the characters build up. See, on one hand, we have reviews saying there's not enough characterization. And then on the other hand, we have reviews being we bounce around too much and we're just getting, day-to-day scenes of different people. Well, yeah, how else are you going to build up characters and motivations and, emotion and connection and all that stuff? It takes time. Lazy writing or bad editing is to blame. I fear, but I don't have to keep reading this when other writers said, okay, fine. Listen, this was a debut fantasy novel. If you don't like it, that's fine. I totally get it. But I think you're missing out on the rest of the series. This one here is the last one from Malice. Have you ever found a book so bland that you just refuse to continue reading it? To me, it happens rarely, but it did with Malice by John Gwynn. And I do feel a sense of loss since the reviews I've seen are also overwhelmingly positive. Maybe if I would have just read a few more formulaic chapters, I would have gotten to the part where something anything happens. But no, I do have a lot of books to read, and I'm not going to waste my time reading about another child who wants to be a hero, but he's weak and bullied, another large blacksmith who was once a soldier. Like, this is not spoilers. This is all very like tropey and set up, and like poor farm boy goes on this quest, said to be part of this prophecy, blah, blah, blah. It all gets turned on its head. This is not really spoilery. Don't worry. After several chapters, all I got was a bunch of people in different contexts, each with their own names, friends, family, dreams, history, and narration. It sounds a lot like reality and real life, with people in different places with their own world and connections and relationships. Whenever I thought something would happen, another character with a silly name came along to perform whatever ritual is assigned to its cardboard role. Confusing and boring as hell. It is a little bit confusing. There is a lot going on. There's a bunch of characters. It works its way through. John Gwynn is very good at slowly feeding you the connective tissue and the puzzle pieces and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a little convoluted. I can see someone who's maybe not a huge fantasy reader, like struggling to understand what the hell is going on. Bottom line, I couldn't even begin to finish it. I probably read about 10 to 15% and gave up. Well, if I read that sentence first, I would have given up on this review too. See you later. All right, the next one is Project Hail Mary by, can't remember Andy Weir. There we go. I read this one 2 years ago, I think 2020 or 2021, can't remember. And I really enjoyed it. I really had a good time with it. 4.52 stars on Goodreads, 335,000 ratings, almost 44,000 reviews, 63% gave this a 5-star, less than 1% gave this a 1-star. That's pretty crazy. Let's see some of these 1-star reviews and see what people didn't like. The first one is, bam, I was going to give it a higher rating, but Jesus Christ, what an awful ending. Absolutely insulting to the time put in to read it. I actually disagree. I actually really liked the ending. I thought it was a little bit of a twist. I thought it was interesting. I can understand it not being the ending that a lot of people maybe wanted, but I thought it was a realistic and kind of an interesting ending. And I thought that had it ended the way that most people would have wanted, and if you've read this book, you understand what I'm talking about, a lot of people would have been like, wouldn't it have been cool if it ended this way? And it actually ended that way. So yeah, I mean, to each their own. We're not all going to like the same books. All right, the next Project Hail Mary one is, in the editor's note at the beginning of this book, the editor notes that they love this newest novel by Weir because it pushes the science. It also pushes all credibility and sense. I have a very strong willing suspension of disbelief, but this went too far, making it much more a fantasy of about a 5-year-old than anything else. If you enjoyed the technical creativity of The Martian, you'll want to give this one a pass. I disagree. I read The Martian. I didn't like it as much as this, which is weird. I'm in the absolute minority of that. I completely understand. But I think if you like The Martian, you'll love this one. It's very similar. Now, some people say that it's too similar. Some people say that the character is very, very much the same humor, same outlook, same kind of struggle, without giving anything away, struggling to survive. Though in Project Hail Mary, it's under a different set of circumstances. Very, very interesting, I thought. Yeah, no, I think that if you like the creativity and the resourcefulness and the MacGyvering and stuff and trying to like figure out what the hell's going on, there is a bit of a mystery in this one too, where like he wakes up and doesn't know who he is or why he is where he is. It's kind of crazy. I think if you liked all that stuff in The Martian, where he's trying to figure out how to get out of this bind, you're really going to like this one. I can understand liking one more than the other, but to say that if you like this one, you are not going to like this one, I don't think that jives. I liked The Martian. I just didn't like it as much as Project Hail Mary. So yeah, and in terms of credibility or pushing the science or making it fantasy, look, if you can tell me the realistic way to like survive in space under these circumstances, and there is a little bit of, like playing with reality there and a little bit of fantasy and like, oh, this could possibly happen, but I don't think it's that far-fetched where like it doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, I guess it's okay if you just don't like it. That is totally cool. The last Project Hail Mary, I can't believe I'm saying this, but DNF at 40%, and that's after 10 days of slogging through this. Loved The Martian, but this book feels so contrived. Total copycat of The Martian, but with significantly less enjoyable main character. I'm great at suspending disbelief, but this one requires far too much of that. So bummed to put this one down. Suspending disbelief. I've heard that before, and that was the last review that I just put up. So I wonder if this is the same person talking about it, or if they just read that other review and were like, I'm good at suspending disbelief too, but this one is too far-fetched. I don't know. I'm gonna disregard this one because I don't know if this is another person or if it's the same one. I don't know. Let's go to the next book. I got 2 more books for you guys. The next one is Swan Song. Swan Song, let's look at the stats. This one is 4.28 on Goodreads, 62,000 ratings, 4,000 reviews, 4,200, 1% 1 star. Again, more than half 5 stars. So the 1 stars are very much in the minority. All right, the first one for Swan Song is DNF after the utterly unnecessary rape 300 pages in that took the book from entertainingly incompetent to creepy and gross. This is a terrible book. No, this is not a terrible book. This is a very good book. And whether or not you agree or appreciate or can stomach certain things that happen in a book, that doesn't mean that it's a bad book. That means that you didn't enjoy or couldn't handle or didn't want to handle, which is your prerogative, certain subject matter or content in a book. And that doesn't make the book bad. So in this one, I would agree that the right move probably was to DNF it. So it's cool to go back and rate this a 1 star. Like if you're going to DNF it because you don't like something about halfway in, just don't rate it. Like I don't like the idea of, I would never rate a book or review a book that I didn't finish. As a judgment call, I just wouldn't do it. I would agree that this is a post-apocalyptic, dark, dreary, grim book. And there's going to be stuff in the book that not everyone likes. I remember one particular scene involving a child or a baby, I think, and that was tough. But was it out of place? Not really. Was it out of context or unbelievable? No. In fact, the reason why it was tough to stomach was that it was fairly realistic under those conditions in this setup of the book. So, I mean, yeah, if you didn't like it, I totally get it. And I can't disagree with that. I just disagree with the review and the rating. Man, I just finished this book and it is terrible. Written at about a 4th grade reading level. Every known stereotype and regurgitated trope of action fiction is thrown into this gallimaufry of lameness, a turd in the punch bowl of post-apocalyptic literature, a genre which really has a hard time going wrong. Okay, first thing I'm going to say is this person seems to be, I'm assuming that this person is fairly well read in this post-apocalyptic genre. And so I would assume, and I'm going to take this for granted, that this person is well read in this and can sort of distinguish between a good post-apocalyptic speculative fiction horror book and a bad one. I would disagree that this is a bad one. I'm not as widely read in this genre as this person might be. But again, I don't think that it was written poorly. I think that it was actually very poetic at times. I referenced the prose in my wrap up or whenever I talked about this. I don't remember when I talked about it, but I talked about the prose. I talked about the imagery, the writing. It was poetic, the descriptions, the imagery, the atmosphere. I thought it was brilliant. In fact, this is one where I was highlighting some passages in my ebook because I was like, God damn, that description is so interesting and so unique. And I just loved it. I liked the writing. This person didn't. What can you do? We don't always agree. All right. This one says, oh my God, nearly a 5-star book. What does this say about the standards of humanity of Goodreads readers? It's sickeningly oppressive. Correct. Depressing. Correct. Unendurable. The situation was probably unendurable for a lot of those people in the book, but I endured reading it. I got halfway through and stopped. It just got worse and worse. Tell you what, I'm getting halfway through your review and I'm stopping as well. New review. Boom. A poor imitation of The Stand. I actually hear that people prefer this to The Stand. So that's interesting. I would disagree with that. I've read most of The Stand. My wife has as well. They're similar, but I don't think you can compare them. And if you do, a lot of people say that Swan Song is better, actually, which is interesting. All right, the final book here, if you've stuck around this long, thank you. That's awesome. The Winter King. This is the first book in the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. If you know me, you know I love this series. It was one of the best trilogies I've read ever. Got me into historical fiction, historical fantasy, whatever. And I really enjoyed it. 4.26 on Goodreads, 43,000 ratings, 1% 1-star reviews, almost 50% said it was a 5-star. So let's go in with that. Why is this written in such a dry and boring narrative style? Bernard Cornwell's books can be exciting and full of period detail that really engages the reader. This one is sadly not like that. There's a helpful list of characters and places and map at the front of the book for those of us unfamiliar with the Welsh names. Agreed, that was kind of tough to deal with, but the map and all the character names, the appendix, whatever, really helped. I dutifully consulted this every time few new names were mentioned, but after 50 pages found it so boring, blah, 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 where's the action? Okay, non-existent. Where's the conversation? The device of having a narrator, Derval, just didn't work for me. Okay, that's cool. You know what? It sounds like the slow build, the setup, the narrative structure, him kind of telling the story of like what happened. I always forget what that's called. Framed narrative, I think. Yeah, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work. I do agree that it was a little bit overwhelming at the beginning. There was a lot of names and pronunciation challenges and stuff. If you're going to read this, listen to the audiobook or at least have it as a companion to the regular book or the hard copy or ebook or whatever, at least until you get a sense of the pronunciation and the names and the quality. Jonathan Keeble does an excellent job. It's one of the best audiobook experiences I've ever had, and I would highly recommend it. So that made it easier, but yeah, it's a slow start. It does build up. I really like it. I can't fault someone for not liking a book one where it does take some build up and it's a little info dumping at the beginning, but it does get very, very good. A lot of people love this one for a reason. And if the frame narrative or whatever structure doesn't work for you, then that's cool. Let's see, number 2. Bam. At least I read as much as I'm going to for now. What? I'm about 2/3 through. It is well written and an interesting take on the Arthur legend. Agree. It feels like it has an anti-Christian bend to it. Arthur is not Christian and all the Christian characters are depicted as ignorant, filthy, dishonest, hypocritical scum. Interesting. I never thought about it that way. Guinevere is scary and Lancelot is a lying dandy. I much prefer the Jack White end of the Roman Empire setting and version. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, it sort of depends on your preconceptions about this story. This was my introduction to the Arthur stuff. As you know, I know a little bit about it with the Sword and the Stone, and a little bit about the story, but this was my first like retelling or fantasy or historical fiction foray into the Arthur stuff. And I didn't have any preconceived notions about it. So I can see that it conflicting with what's already in your head can be a challenge. The characters, the Christian characters, I mean, it is describing a certain time in history where this religious like conflict was kind of everywhere. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was really an attack on Christianity. I think it just happened to be that, I don't even know what to say to that. I don't want to dig in too much into the religious stuff, but I didn't really hang on that and it didn't really bother me as much, but I can understand someone looking at this and going, that's kind of interesting. I do think it was pretty realistic in its interpretation of, and that's what made it so good. It felt like it was real and it was real. I mean, the Arthur stuff wasn't really real, but the places, the religious conflicts, the wars and the battles and the different the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings or whoever, like all that stuff was pretty real. And so I don't know, hard to argue with this one. I get it. The next review just says no. I would say yes. My response is yes. Another one says stupid, unreliable bastard. I don't know what that means. Yeah, so I was very excited to read this series, struggled through this book, not what I expected, did not enjoy it. It's like Cornwell tries to make everyone look ugly and disgusting and basically destroy a cool legend. Listen, back in the Dark Ages, back in fucking medieval time, whenever this takes place, I think it's the Dark Ages, people were disgusting. People looked like trash. People didn't bathe. People had bad hygiene. People had no teeth. Like it was a different time. So I don't know if you can fault him for bringing a little bit of realism and explaining that people didn't look great and didn't smell great. So yeah, I think that this is not really warranted. I think it was pretty realistic and I kind of enjoyed that. You know what? Let's do one more on the Winter King. A gritty historical fantasy tale more concerned with describing the geopolitical scene than the story or characters. I would say that in the beginning of this trilogy, the very first book does need to info dump a little bit. It does need to set up and it does dwell a little bit on the geopolitical scene more than develop the characters. I will say that you become much more invested in the characters later. Arthur doesn't even come in till like later on in the first book or even in the second book. I don't remember. I think it's later near the end of the first book. And yeah, there's a little bit of setup. I get that. After having read The Sky Stone, the beginning of this book gave me a breath of fresh air. It is much better written. There is more characterization and the elements of the Arthurian fantasy were actually present here. Arthur, Merlin, Morgan, Uther, and many others. The characters introduced were very different from what you would expect. Merlin is a vicious old man, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I think this is giving credit where it's due for the Winter King, comparing it being better than the Sky Stone, I believe. And then he says further down, or this person says further down, however, the book's pacing is atrociously slow. The author spends most of his time naming and describing all of Britain's kingdoms and rulers and how they relate to each other. Did this person read 41% of it? It says down here something, I don't know what that means. But yeah, I can understand the pacing and the info dumping a little bit and the setup being slow for a lot of people. I get that. It kind of is what it is. I would say Enemy of God is my favorite book. Well, is it? Yeah, it's my favorite book in the trilogy. I would say if you were like, okay with The Winter King, lukewarm, you didn't hate the writing style, you didn't hate the frame narrative, you didn't hate any one thing in particular, I would say give Enemy of God a chance. Give book 2 a shot, see how that goes for you, because it really kicks off there. The ending of Winter King, I thought, made up for it, but if you didn't even like that, go into Enemy of God book 2 and at least maybe try the audiobook. Again, try the audiobook. It gives a whole different flair. The production quality is amazing. It's completely worth it. Try that if you didn't like it. So anyway, have you guys read any of these? Do you agree with some of these reviews? Which ones, did you vibe with? Which ones did you disagree with the most? I can find criticisms to agree with, or at least give a little bit of weight to. And a lot of these ones, I could see your point, but a lot of them were also kind of just crap. So thanks for sitting with me while we went through them. I appreciate you hanging out. And again, if you like the vibe, go ahead, subscribe. I'll be doing more reviews to come, maybe a wrap up catch up coming up soon. So yeah, stick around. I appreciate you being here. Catch you soon on the next one.